sports leader. Your faithful fix with your host, Larry Krueger, begins.
We'll take phone calls. We'll talk Niners for a full hour. Fired up. Really excited.
Now.
And good morning, Larry Krueger with you on The Sports Leader. Here we are on the 14th of September, the day before the 49ers take on the Minnesota Vikings and try to do what they have not been able to do in the last 7 trips, and that is win in Minneapolis. It's hard to believe, really. 49ers have gone 0 for their last 7 on trips to Minneapolis. The last time the Niners got it done in Minnesota against the Vikings and actually came away with a win, Jerry Rice and Steve Young were still doing their thing back in 1992, one of the great 49er teams in history. That was the last time they got it done on the road. It's unbelievable when you really think about it. And they get another shot. Last year, it was the Kirk Cousins show where, Steve Wilkes blitzed him a ton. They had the 0 blitz right before the first half ended, and Cousins just carved up the Niner defense like a Thanksgiving turkey. I mean, it was crazy. He completed 78% of his passes. He threw for almost 400 yards, and it was just like they were always just a step slow, just a little bit away from the ball. I mean, they could not interrupt the unbelievable rhythm of Kirk Cousins. But Cousins has moved on to the Falcons, and the Vikings have moved on to Sam Darnold. And now we'll see if the former 49er quarterback can beat the 49ers on Sunday. And, of course, the morning window. And, of course, I'll join Adam and Johnny tomorrow for a little early morning edition of 49er football as we get you ready in the pregame, and then I'll join them for a segment in the postgame. And it should be interesting. The 49ers look great in week 1. I thought they looked the best, to be honest, of almost any team in week 1. They went up against a Jets team that has a really good defense, and they put 32 on them, and they kicked 6 field goals in the process. Imagine if the Niners had kicked, 2 field goals. They could have scored 50 points on this team. That would have been dramatic. But instead, they settled for a bunch of field goals. Ayuk didn't look great. Trent Williams played 70 snaps, and the Niners got it done. They got it done anyway, and they put up 32, and it was impressive. And Robert Saleh said on Monday, he's like, man, the singular key to the 49ers offense is their offensive line. And then not a lot of people have made that claim. But the Niner offensive line set the tone. So much so when I asked Chris Forster about his line this week, he's like, yeah, we were all right. We were okay. We weren't bad. It's like he knows damn well that they were more than not bad. They were very, very, very good. And that's the O-line really was the hero of this last game. Jordan Mason obviously gets the headlines, but the offensive line really did a job. I mean, you think about this 49er offensive line, it's probably been one of the most maligned units connected to the Niners really over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, everybody loves to rip the line. Yeah, they're good, but their line stinks. Does their line stink, really? You got Trent Williams at left tackle. He's the best. You've got Banks at left guard. He's really solid. Brendel was a Pro Bowl alternate 2 years ago. Now you've got Big Dom Pooney at right guard. I love that kid. Absolutely love that kid. He's fantastic. And then you got Colton, who, according to PFF, was the 5th highest graded 49er on the offensive side of the ball, at least, in that Jets game. So is the Niners line bad, or is the Niners line unfairly maligned? I'll say this. There are 2 numbers that jumped out to me this week, all really are about the Niner offensive line. The Niner O-line posted a 96.1% pass block win rate, which was 3rd best in the NFL in week 1. So, I mean, you're going up against Quinnen Williams, Javon Kinlaw, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, a really good Jets defensive line, and the Niners pushed them around. Absolutely pushed them around. They did a great job in pass protection against a really good pass rushing line. And then J.P. Mason had 94 yards before he was ever touched. That's a lot. 94 of Mason's 147 came before contact. So that's an offensive line stat right there. And by the way, only Joe Mixon, who had 107 yards with the Texans last week before contact. He was the only back other than Mason, or the only back that had more yards before contact than Mason. So Mason, Mason's intriguing. He's absolutely an intriguing player. He's a guy that is 225 pounds, and he's got a lot of talent. Okay, so what are we going to do this hour? This first segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the keys to victory. We'll just get right into it on both sides of the ball. We'll get into it. Second segment, we're going to talk about Christian McCaffrey. If there's one just absolute, the Niners wouldn't be the Niners unless there was some drama. And the drama is that possibly, I'm not going to say for sure, but possibly later today, the 49ers may put Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve. Now, we'll talk all about it and what their options are. And they do have options. And, it's not like, and this is kind of one of those things, if you're driving around on a Saturday, how would you like to see John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan play their cards with Christian McCaffrey? Because you do have options. You absolutely have options. It's not like, there's nothing you can do. You can just, they've got one thing and then one move only. No, they got multiple moves they can make. They could put him on IR. They could shelve him for 6 weeks. They could shelve him for 12 weeks. I'll tell you what my plan is, and we'll go through some of the options in the next segment. And then bottom of the hour, John Krosinsky is going to join us from The Athletic. He is the Vikings beat writer for The Athletic, and we'll get his thoughts on the matchup tomorrow. Looking forward to that conversation. And then we'll finish up with, if we have time, I caught up with Jake Tongas. In fact, I'm going to go see Cal San Diego State tonight. And the one Cal Bear, Jake Tongas, who had absolutely an amazing summer. I don't know that the guy dropped a ball. I didn't even think he was NFL coming into this camp. I thought, oh man, he's just a body. He's just a camp body. And then he comes to camp. He never dropped a single ball. He was great. Jake Tongas had a phenomenal summer, and he made the team. So good for Jake. And we talked about, who he called and, when he found out he made it and all that and just the excitement. So we caught up with Jake. Jake's a good dude. So we'll play some of that conversation before we get out of here. Oh, by the way, we're the lead in today for Fantasize This or Fantasize That or Fantasize This. I think it's this. Okay, fantasize this. Fantasize this. Not fantasize that. Fantasize this with Copes and Marcus. So we're the lead in for them. They'll come at you at 11 o'clock. But if you want to jump in, if you were John Lynch, how would you play your hand of cards when it comes to Christian McCaffrey? I'd love to hear from you. There's a lot of Niner fans out there. And as I said, there's more than one way that they can play this. They have some different options. As far as replacements and how they go about it, how they look at him. There's guys off the street they could sign. There's free agents they could sign off the street. There's practice squad guys they could pluck from other teams' practice squads. There are trade candidates that they could potentially pursue between now and November. I think first week in November is the NFL trade deadline. So 808 KNBR, if you're driving around on a Saturday, if you're John Lynch, how do you want him to play his hand of cards? We'll get into that next segment. We can take some of your calls if you want to jump in. All right, what I want to get into in this first segment, though, is the matchup itself. And why don't we start with the Niner offense against the Minnesota defense? Minnesota's got a 3-4 defense. This is Kyle Shanahan trying to lock horns with Brian Flores, who's a terrific defensive coordinator. And the fact of the matter is the Niners offense has averaged 22.6 first downs per game over the last 2 seasons with Brock Purdy. That is the most in the NFL. So you want to know where the Niners are with Brock Purdy? 22.6 first downs per game over the last couple of years with him as the starter, and that is the most in the league. So they're good on offense. The Niners offense with Brock Purdy scores 30 a game, really 32 a game. But Kyle, when I asked him this week about Minnesota's defense, he described them as unique. And they are unique in a lot of ways. They're extremely well coached. Brian Flores is a terrific coach. There's not one team in this league that runs more zero coverages than the Vikings. They put their guys on the back end and they say, hey, you know what? You better stand up. Why? Because they blitz a ton. Nobody blitzes often as the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores. They blitz about 80% of the time. They dial up all kinds of exotic blitzes. Kyle says that even though they're like a blitz type team and they play a lot of zero coverage, they also give you the illusion of being kind of a bend but don't break type defense. And the other thing they don't do as a defense is they don't give up explosives. They don't give up big plays. So they keep everything in front of them, and they kind of frustrate you if you're super aggressive, and they make you kind of take what they give you. And we'll find out if Purdy can be patient. We'll find out if Purdy can, take his time and methodically drive the Niners up and down the field. Brock got unfairly tabbed as a dink and dunk guy, which is just total garbage. He's, if anything, probably more of a home run guy. He's trying to make the big play all the time. So he's going to have to show patience in this game. Now, the strength of the Vikings defensive line is their 4 defensive ends. They got 4 really good ones. Jonathan Greenard comes over. He played at Florida. He was in Houston last year. Daniil Hunter is now in Houston, and Greenard's in Minnesota. It wasn't a trade, but they both left in free agency. Then they have Patrick Jones II. He had 2 sacks last week in week 1 against the New York Giants. They signed Andrew Van Ginkel, who ended Jimmy G's reign here in San Francisco with that hit to his foot a couple years ago. And then they drafted Dallas Turner, who's, the baby in the bunch. He's 21 years old, and he's awesome. I mean, an incredible athlete. So Trent Williams and Colton McKivitz will be under extreme pressure in this game. The wild card factor for the Vikings on defense is Josh Metellus, their safety. He's an excellent blitzer. He's like 25, 26. He's a medium-sized guy, 5'11", 210. But he went to Michigan. He's a great football player. I mean, this guy will rush the passer. He's a big part of their rush plan. They send him on blitzes all over the field. He has to be accounted for at the line of scrimmage. So, to me, how the Niners block up Josh Metellus is going to be a big part of who wins this game. Expect to see the Niners use a trio of backs. Obviously, there'll be no CMC. I think you'll get a full dose of J.P. Mason. But this week, I think you're also going to get Isaac Guerrero, the rookie out of Louisville, and Patrick Taylor. And that's kind of exciting. The Niners have kind of a 3-headed power back trio that they're going to unleash on the Vikings this weekend. If the Niners are going to have success running the ball, there's 3 guys they're going to have to block up front. You got to get the former Stanford star Harrison Phillips blocked. He's the nose guard. Short arm guy, but man, he's tough. And he's got a crazy motor, and he's great against the run. Always has been. So you got to get Harrison Phillips blocked. You got to get Harrison Smith blocked on the back end, the 13-year veteran safety who's 35. He's a hell of a player. The Niners, by the way, ran for 180 last week against the Jets, and they're going to try to do it again. The guy they absolutely have to get blocked is Ivan Pace, the 5'10", 230-pound linebacker from Cincinnati who had over 100 tackles last year. Pace is an amazing player. And then also, you got to look for Cam Bynum in a veteran secondary. They've got Stephon Gilmore back there now. Last year, Cam Bynum at free safety. He's the guy who played a corner at Cal a couple years ago. He picked off Brock Purdy twice last year in that game, in the night game there. So Bynum leads a veteran secondary. So that's on offense. The Niners have their work cut out for them for sure. I would say on defense, when you look at Minnesota's offense with Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips going up against Sorensen and Staley and the Niner defense, Minnesota has some of the NFL's best players on offense. Justin Jefferson is maybe the best receiver in the game. Aaron Jones is a gutty player who can catch the ball and run. Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle, might be one of the best young left tackles in the game. 6'5", 320, just a monster. First-round pick out of Vautech in 2021. So, and then Niners do catch a break. They won't have Jordan Addison, who lit them up last year. Vikings won't have TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson's out. So they're down a couple weapons. The key matchup, I think, and the reason I love the Niners in this game is that, Brian O'Neill and Darrisaw are going to be, against Bosa and Leonard Floyd. That, to me, is that's the marquee matchup. And if the Niners win there, I think it's a big win for the Niners. But Minnesota's going to use a lot of play action. They go a lot of bootleg. They play with tempo. They'll go hurry up on you. The Niners' advantage is inside. Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins, I think, overpower Garrett Bradbury and Blake Brandel and especially Ed Ingram. So I think that's where the Niners win. I think Hargrave and Collins are going to dominate up front. The Niners have to swarm and gang tackle Aaron Jones, and they got to pressure Sam Darnold in his face and force him to move laterally. If he's comfortable, he'll carve you up. He's got great arm talent. If you make him move laterally, he'll throw you 2 picks, and you'll win the game by 14 points. So there you go. I like the Niners to win the game. I think it will probably be a low-scoring game. But I like the 49ers to get it done in Minnesota. All right, let's come back. We're going to talk about the different options the Niners have with CMC. Bottom of the hour, John Krosinsky joins us from The Athletic to preview the game. And welcome to the second edition of 49ers Forecast. If you want to chime in, feel free. Bang out the number. Bang the number, 808 KNBR. Larry Krueger with you on a beautiful Saturday on The Sports Leader.
I think, just with Christian, especially there's certain plays, third down, where we like to get him out and throw to him and stuff like that. And so there's a lot of teams that can either double team him and then open up some other guys within our offense. And so that's something that, we sort of have to remember. That's a huge aspect. Teams always have to account for him and have a whole plan for Christian. He's the best in the league at it. When he's not out there, I think it sort of not necessarily simplifies things for defenses, but that's a component that they don't have to really handle, and then they can focus on George and BA and Debo. So that's something that for us that we have to understand. And as a quarterback, I always like having that because I think it does open up other guys. So.
Welcome back to 49er Forecast on a Saturday. Larry Krueger with you. And, of course, check out Niners Nightly, which I host 6 to 7 Monday through Friday, and it will be on KNBR or KNBR's YouTube page if the Giants are doing their thing, and that's what happened this week. The Giants were doing their thing every night, so we were on YouTube from 6 to 7, but that's where we will be from 6 to 7 throughout the year, talking 49er football every night on The Sports Leader from 6 to 7 o'clock, so join us. That was Brock Purdy coming back, talking about Christian McCaffrey. Kyle Shanahan sat down with us yesterday in Santa Clara and described that McCaffrey had his worst day on Thursday and had experienced the most pain on Thursday. And it's been kind of an ugly start so far for Christian McCaffrey. As far as, the Niners gave him a 2-year extension, made him the highest paid running back in the league. He was the cover guy for Madden 25, Madden curse, Madden curse, Madden curse. Nobody believes in it, but it just seems like everybody who's on the cover of Madden is cursed and always just winds up getting hurt or being out for the year, or some terrible thing happens to whoever's on the cover of that video game. This year it's Christian. He was asked about the Madden curse. No, Madden curse? No, nothing. Madden this, curse that, what? We might want to revisit that. He may be cursed. Do you believe in the Madden curse? I mean, there's lots of examples of guys who have been on the cover of that video game and then just fell apart. I mean, there's like 15 different examples of it happening that way. So I don't know. I don't believe in curses, but I'm just saying. By the way, we'll talk more about this matchup with John Krosinsky from The Athletic, bottom of the hour. But Niners and Vikings coming up tomorrow. And, of course, we'll have it for you, and I'll be part of the pregame with Adam and John tomorrow morning with Dennis. Actually, Dennis doesn't do road games, but John and Adam tomorrow, and then I'll join them in the pre and in the post. So look for that tomorrow. Christian McCaffrey might go on IR today, and that would be a terrible thing. He's already been ruled out. The Niners, obviously, he had some setback Thursday in practice. I've heard people say that it was a major setback and it was dramatic and the team surrounded him and he walked back to the locker room. I didn't see any of that. I was there. I didn't see any of that. I didn't see him go down. I didn't see the team surround him. I didn't see him walk back to the locker room. So I'll just take people's word on that. But the Niners are considering putting CMC on IR. Shanahan ruled it out early in the week. Lynch said it to Marcus and Murph on Friday on KNBR that the IR was a distinct possibility. And then when we talked to Shanahan later on Friday, he agreed that IR is a distinct possibility for Christian. So the question is this: how should the Niners play their hand of cards when it comes to Christian? There's lots of options here. The pain supposedly got a lot worse on Thursday. He possibly could rupture that Achilles by playing on it. That's just reality. I don't know what the risk factors are. None of you do either. Obviously, an Achilles rupture to a 28-year-old running back would be a devastating thing to happen to Christian's career. It would be equally devastating to the 49ers' Super Bowl chances this year. I don't think it would ruin their Super Bowl chances, but it would put a downer on it. It would put a damper on things. It would make things a whole lot more difficult. That's for sure. And as we are sitting here, the Niners have placed Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve, designated to return, I believe. This is just coming across as we speak, and maybe Raf can find it more than I just did, but I'm hearing that Christian McCaffrey is going to be put on injured reserve. So that is going to happen. So that means, and that's great as far as, he's, they set him aside. They've got other backs. But But even resting for 4 weeks does not guarantee that he's going to be able to get through the rest of the year. It was listed as a calf injury, then an Achilles injury. Now it's Achilles tendonitis. It seems to be getting worse. He has missed games in his career. He missed 13 games in 2020. He missed 10 more the next year in 2021. He only played 10 games combined in those 2 seasons. Other than that, Christian's been relatively healthy as a pro. From talking to Shanahan and being down there around the Niner facility, it's pretty obvious that you're get ready for the 3-headed monster of J.P. Mason, who's 5'11", 230, and he's 25, and he's coming off a 150-yard day against the Jets, 5'3" a carry. Then there's Guerendo, who's 6 feet, 220, but he runs in the 4.3s. He's a 24-year-old kid with a ton of talent. And then I caught up with Patrick Taylor, who signed on and is a free agent from Green Bay in the offseason. He's 6'2" and 220 and only 26 years of age. I would say for the next month, you're going to see these 3 guys, Mason and Guerendo and Taylor. They're going to minimize the Debo carries because that's just a, an emergency break glass. They don't want to run Debo. Debo doesn't want to be run. They'll spot him, but he's not going to be primary. They're going to run these other guys, Mason, probably the most, and then a little bit of Guerendo and a little bit of Patrick Taylor. And they may be fine with that. So I look at the season, and I mentioned this on the stream earlier this week on the Krug Show on YouTube, and I've been talking about this, all week, that I kind of look at the season as 6-game, chunks. So there's the first 6 weeks, then there's weeks 7 through 13, and then there's kind of 14 through the end in the playoffs. So you got like three distinct different periods. I would not. Last year, you let Christian call his shots. He could do whatever he wanted. This year, I would say don't let him call his shots. You decide who you go after, or you decide when he's going to play. So I wouldn't let him play in the first 7 games for sure. Now, week 7 for the Chiefs, maybe I dust him off there if he's feeling great. If he's not, I'll keep him on the sideline and keep rolling with what I got. And if you can run for 150 behind these big power backs without Christian out there, roll with it. Just roll with it. But the Niners have options. They have Keyshawn Vaughn on the practice squad. You could sign a Matt Breida or a Leonard Fournette or a Kareem Hunt off the street. You could sign Frank Gore's kid, Frank Gore Jr., or like an Amani Bailey who's in Kansas City off the practice squad of those teams. There's like 10 good young backs who are in practice squads. Or you could potentially make a trade, and that probably won't come until later in the year, but I've heard Jeff Wilson's name thrown out, Miles Sanders, Roshan Johnson, and Khalil Herbert of the Bears, Jamal Williams of the Saints. Somebody threw out Najee Harris of the Steelers, Dante Foreman, and Pierre Strong of the Browns. There are options in the trade market. There are options as street free agents. There are options off other teams' practice squads. And you have internal options on your roster, and you got Keyshawn Vaughn, who, once upon a time, he was a hell of a player at Vandy, at Illinois. He was, Mr. Football in the state of Tennessee in high school. I mean, Keyshawn Vaughn is not a slouch. So they have options. But that's how I'd play my cards. I would not play him in the first 7 weeks. I would only barely consider it in those second 6-week period. In an ideal world, I'm dusting off Christian in like week 13 and 14, playing him in the final stretch of the year in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. That would be my plan. I don't know what Lynch's plan is. I don't know what Shanahan's plan is. That would be my plan. Let's do this. Let's take a timeout. Let's come back. We're going to talk with John Krosinsky from The Athletic. He is the Vikings beat writer for The Athletic. We'll get his thoughts on the matchup tomorrow. What he expects to see from Sam Darnold, from Justin Jefferson, from Brian Flores in his matchup with Shanahan. And then before we get out of here, we'll let you hear our conversation with Jake Tongas, the Cal Bear tight end, former Cal Bear, who's now had a great summer with the 49ers. So up next, John Krosinsky of The Athletic, as we look ahead to tomorrow's Niner-Viking game on 49er Forecast on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the sports leader.
And welcome back to 49er Forecast. Larry Krueger with you on a Saturday. Beautiful day. And the day before, the Niners take on the Minnesota Vikings in Week 2. And John Krosinsky, who covers the Vikings for The Athletic, is with us on the UMA guest line to talk a little Vikings and help us break it down. John, thanks for the time.
Hey, thanks for having me, Larry. Appreciate it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that Viking Week 1. Man, they held the New York Giants to 6 points. I think a lot of the headlines, were, hey, man, look at Sam Darnold, like how great Sam Darnold was. But I thought Brian Flores' defense is what stood out to me. 5 sacks, 12 hits on Daniel Jones. They really made things uncomfortable for Jones.
Yeah, they did. I mean, obviously you kind of look at the Giants with a little bit of a grain of salt. I think they're a really bad team. They're going to lose a lot of games. But that said, I think what you want to see if you're a Vikings team in that situation is you want to make a bad team look really bad. And that's exactly what they did. Brian Flores kind of went against type in that game in terms of, last year the Vikings were one of the teams that really relied on blitz, on pressure, on bringing extra attackers against a front and really turning up the heat that way. The encouraging thing for the Vikings against the Giants was they got home a lot against Daniel Jones rushing 4. And I think that there's some versatility along the defensive line. They feel really good about some of the additions, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel in free agency, and then Dallas Turner in the first round of the draft. And so they feel really good about that group. And that allowed the weakness perhaps of this defense, the secondary and the cornerbacks in particular, to just be able to cover for a few seconds rather than 4 or 5. And that really changes things for this defense when they're able to get home like that with fewer rushers and make things happen that way.
Let's talk about Flores' defense. It's a 3-4 look. I don't know how much of it was them, how much of it is the ineptitude of Daniel Jones, but New York couldn't run the ball in this game. I mean, if you take out the 14-yard run that Wan'Dale Robinson had, you're looking at 20 carries for 60 yards. I mean, they just couldn't run it at all. Devin Singletary was shut down. The Giants just couldn't run the football. What do you think? I mean, how good is this Vikings run D? They're going to get a full dose, I would imagine, of Jordan Mason.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a good run defense. They're a little bit light in the middle, but I think against the Giants, it didn't hurt them at all. I don't think that there's anyone that the Giants could put the ball in the hands of and you'd be really scared of. I just don't think that they're all that talented back there. From a weapon standpoint, but clearly Sunday is going to be a much bigger test for this defense with the physicality of the Niners, even with McCaffrey out, but Jordan Mason looked great last week. I just think that, I'm sort of suspending some of my evaluation of the team off of that week 1 just because I'm not giving the Giants a whole lot of credit. And so I think that whatever happens in week 2 here with the Niners, whether they win or lose, but even if they're able to keep it competitive and really hold up against kind of a team that really does like to bully you, even if it's a close loss, I think you feel good about the Vikings going into it. But this is definitely going to be a much stiffer test for them. But I do like a lot of the depth that the Vikings have defensively, especially along the defensive line. I think that they play with an aggression and a nastiness that is instilled in them by Brian Flores. He is a no nonsense, let's get after it, we want to be tough and we want to be mean kind of a coach. And the defense has definitely taken on that personality. So that will give them, I think, the right mindset going into this game. Now it's just a matter of can they hold up physically against a much more talented, much bigger, stronger, meaner offense in the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, I think Flores is a tremendous defensive coach. I think they're really well coached, especially when I watched them. I saw all 3 of the preseason games. I watched their week 1 game. They run a ton of zero coverage. They blitz a lot. He dials up a lot of exotics, and they've got this kid Metellus who's just tremendous at safety. Talk a little bit about Josh Metellus because he is kind of the wild card in the rush plan. How do they use him at the line of scrimmage. He's a dominating player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's been an incredible find for them because, one of the criticisms of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the GM of the Vikings, was in his very first draft, he traded out of a spot that would have given him Kyle Hamilton, who was a clear need at safety right next to Harrison Smith, who will probably be a Hall of Famer eventually and is kind of, in the last days of his just great NFL career. And so they passed on him. He drafts Lewis Seen later in the draft, and later in the first round, he doesn't even play, and he's, they ended up having to cut him. It was a terrible pick. And so you're thinking, what do they do at safety? Like, how do they kind of make up for that? Well, lo and behold, here comes Josh Metellus out of Michigan, and I think what Brian Flores loves about him and what I think really makes him a weapon for this defense is that versatility that you were kind of indicating. He can play safety. He can almost play a pseudo linebacker, getting up close to the line of scrimmage and supporting the run. He is one of those guys who is in the Brian Flores mold of plays with a chip on his shoulder, wants to prove something. He was not a first-round draft pick. He was not a guy that was just like had a ton of attention put on him. And so he's trying to make a name for himself, and he does it. He's just a playmaker. He's one of those guys that always finds himself in the right positions. And his emergence, along with even Cam Bynum, has been good for them in that safety spot opposite of Harrison Smith. It has really mitigated what was a huge, huge draft mistake by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And his emergence, I think, as a real playmaker and as just kind of a guy that you can put anywhere on any level of the defense and he's going to make things happen, has been just a really big thing for this Vikings defense.
I'm sure the Niners roll in with a ton of respect, especially after the way last year's game went.
Yeah.
But I think if you're a 49er fan, you got to feel kind of fortunate. I mean, last year you missed out on Jefferson and you still got beat because Jordan Addison went off and TJ Hawkinson went off. And both those guys are not in this game. But Jefferson is the best receiver going. And Aaron Jones is a gutty, tough two-way player. And Darisaw might be one of the best young left tackles in the game. To me, if the 49ers are going to get it done as we flip the card from the Minnesota defense to the Minnesota offense and the Niner D, I think the Niners' main advantage in this game on defense is Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins against Bradbury and Ingram in the center of that line. Obviously, the Vikings have great tackles. How do you think the interior guys stand up against Collins and Hargrave?
Yeah, it's going to be the biggest key, you're right, Larry, in terms of the matchups, because that is historically, really over the last several years, been the Vikings' offense biggest weakness is they are soft or light in the middle. And so it's a little bit easier for for opponents to really kind of disrupt an offense's rhythm, to really get in the quarterback's face by bringing pressure up the middle. And so how they plan to deal with those two guys is going to be just really key in the outcome of this game. Dexter Lawrence, the great Giants tackle, first play of the game on week 1, he had a sack, and he still was very disruptive. But I just think that the Niners have much more around those two to take some of the attention away and force maybe more one-on-ones and more kind of straight up look you in the eye matchups than the Giants were able to. And so I think that San Francisco's recipe for success in this game is going to be collapse the middle of the offensive line, leave no room for Aaron Jones to run, and leave not much time for Sam Darnold to get clean looks down the field. And if they can disrupt the Vikings' rhythm offensively that way, I think that will be a big factor. Now, if the Vikings can hold their water and at least mitigate some of that and not have it be such a mismatch, then I think they're going to be in fairly good shape, because I think that, the team that the Niners played last year in Minnesota, even though Jefferson was not out there, they were a different look. They didn't have the running threat that Aaron Jones is. And so they're a little more multidimensional. And I think you're going to see Kevin O'Connell try to mix things up a lot more in this game and keep the Niners defense guessing a little bit more. But it all does start up front there. If Garrett Bradbury, if Ed Ingram, who has really struggled at guard, has a tough outing again, they're going to have their work cut out for them.
30 seconds left in the segment. I think the Niners have to pressure Darnold in his face, force him to move laterally. If they do that, I like the Niners' chances, but I expect a low-scoring, tight game. I'll say 21-14 49ers. I expect a low-scoring game. Give me your final score.
Yeah, I said 26-20 Niners at the Athletic, and so I'll probably stick with that. I just think that there is a real possibility that Darnold throws a pick six, throws a couple turnovers that put this defense in a harder position on short fields that could allow San Francisco to score a few more points. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a fun game, though. I think it's going to be really tightly contested. I think it's going to be a battle, and turnovers are going to be the key. Can Darnold play a clean game, or does he revert to what he had been in the past and make some mistakes and put his defense in bad positions?
John, appreciate the time, man. Have a great day.
You got it. Thanks, Larry.
John Krosinsky, who covers the Vikings for The Athletic. We're going to come back with one more segment as we continue on 49er Forecast on the Sports Leader.
We're in the Niner locker room with Jake Tongas, the Niners tight end from KNBR. And I was just saying, Saturday night, man, I'm going to be there at Memorial for San Diego State. Man, kid quarterback looked good last week.
Yeah, he looks solid. He looks solid.
Tell me about that kid.
So I was never there with Mendoza, but just from watching him and stuff, I can tell he's a player. He's more of a gamer, which I really respect. I caught the fourth quarter of that game last week.
Yeah.
I couldn't quite get it streamed for the full game, but I was really proud of the guys and the way they played. So.
Been in the organization now for a couple of years. You were here last year on the practice squad.
Yep.
And then you showed up in camp this summer and just it's like you got to another level. So what did you do in the offseason?
It was a lot of focusing on just getting stronger, becoming like a better blocker, being able to hold my own in that aspect. Because I always felt like the catching part and the running routes always came really naturally to me. So I wanted to focus on that part of my game and just take advantage of every rep to show I can do something, and just kind of took it one day at a time. So,
what would you say at Cal was the strength of your game? More receiving than blocking?
I think I did more blocking. We did a lot of 12 personnel. We ran like a very pro-style offense back when I was there with Bill Musgrave. So I did do a lot of blocking. But I still felt like receiving was my strong suit. But I kind of just had to take advantage of the opportunities that I had. And so, but it was super good getting with Musgrave and learning like a pro-style system. A lot of guys in college, they don't even get in the huddle and hear a play until they get in the NFL. So that was helpful. So
the tight end room was an interesting room this summer, right? Because you had Latu, who's a third-round pick, and Kid Pline, who's a converted basketball player who had a good camp, and Nick George, who's obviously a star.
Yeah.
And just a lot of guys. And I thought maybe you had the best camp of catching the football. How did you feel the preseason went? And did you drop a ball this summer? I didn't see you.
None. I don't know, Barsh, did I drop a ball?
No, you never dropped the ball.
I've never dropped a ball either. No, I don't think I dropped any. But yeah, that's, when you get the ball, you get lucky enough to get the ball thrown your way, you got to come down with it. So
right.
That's kind of the mindset.
What about this offense? Kyle, obviously a great play caller. You got all kinds of weapons. He's about 30 a game. The line played incredible this last week.
Yeah.
This is probably easily the most explosive offense you've ever been in.
Been a
What's
part of, for sure.
To see this thing up close and see Kyle design these plays, see the whole thing installed.
Yeah, there's just so many moving parts, and everyone does their job so well. And I think you see a lot of guys try and emulate, what we do around the league. They try and run a lot of the same runs and do a lot of the same things, but they just don't quite, have it right. And I think that comes down to the details that, all the guys focus on, and when Coach Shanahan's installing what he harps on. So it's really just a well-oiled machine, and he's been doing it for so long. He's kind of, has gotten teaching it kind of down to a science. So
I've heard from guys in here that Kyle doesn't just call a play or design a play, that he literally will tell you what the mindset is, the motivation, what everybody's thinking. Does that help you to have all that background data as you're digesting all these plays?
Yeah, because then you get a better understanding of like why the play is in for that week, and he kind of explains it and goes into how he thinks it's going to work out versus different coverages. If they play us this way, we're going to get to here, or if they play us, this way, he's going to get to there. So there's really, on most plays, there's an answer for everything, which is super helpful. And it's been really eye-opening to, learn from him and learn this offense.
Tell us about yourself, man. So you made this team. Who did you call? This was a big moment in your life.
Yeah. So, I obviously called my family first. Yeah. But I think they honestly...
You have a big family?
I got 3 siblings, family of 4. And I have a really big family in Cincinnati, Ohio. And another big family in Pittsburgh. So,
nice.
Yeah, I was getting texts left and right. Some people were telling me I had made it before I had even, gotten the call or been informed. So I was just kind of hanging around here, lifting, just, waiting on the final say. So
is it mentally, not to be too touchy-feely, but is it mentally, like, you put everything you got into, I'm going to be a Niner, I'm going to make this team, all the lifting, all the reading, all the studying, and then guys are packing their bags and they're taking off, and they're getting cut, and they're going in a different direction. It's got to be mentally, like, taxing, at least add a layer of stress to if you have a girlfriend or wife or kids, where we can, that whole thing. How do you manage life in the NFL and be normal?
Yeah, so you really just gotta roll with the punches and not worry about kind of what's happening right now and just kind of take it as it comes, right? My first year I was in Chicago and I loved it over there, and some stuff happened and I ended up getting cut, but obviously I got to come home and play for my hometown team. So there's always like a silver lining, and sometimes a new opportunity is good. So from the moment I got here, I was just, I wanted to play a certain way and gain trust and stuff like that. So that's from the moment I got here, that was my goal, was just put good stuff on tape on scout team last year and just gain trust.
A couple last ones. When your family talks to you about being a Niner, who do they ask about?
They always
ask about Barch, do they?
They ask about Ben Barch. That's the first thing.
Not about Barch, but outside of Barch.
No, they're always asking about Kittle because they see him all over the place, and he's such enthusiastic guy. Brock and stuff like that. So, my family has pretty much met everyone in the tight end room. They came out to practice because they're 20 minutes away, and so they've gotten to meet everyone, and I'm super appreciative of how nice and welcoming they are to my family. So that's been cool for them.
That's very cool. Yeah. Brock, we'll finish with Brock. Give me something. The guy's obviously a terrific young player. Nobody really saw it early on. That's kind of hilarious that people even now to this day don't really believe it. When it's so obvious that it's legit. I heard a guy, JT O'Sullivan, who went to Davis, does a quarterback school, and he said Brock's so good at processing and that he goes through his progressions better than any other quarterback in the league, and he studies all the quarterbacks. It's something that you guys.
I would say just composure. Since I've been here, the moments never seem too big for him. If he makes a mistake, he's very level-headed and calm. And I would say I just really respect his composure. In the huddle and just out there. When the bullets are flying, he really does stay calm. And I think that's the biggest difference you see with college quarterbacks coming to the NFL is it's a more complicated system, more stuff going on, and they just kind of are all over the place. But he's locked in. So.
Congratulations, man, on making this team. Continue living your dream, man. Thanks for the time. And
appreciate you. Yep.
Jake Tongas. Appreciate you, man.
All right, Jake Tongas, and the audio a little bit on my end was a little on the low side, so we'll work on that. But it's the locker room's always a difficult environment to get stuff done in sometimes. But as you could tell, he shares a locker on one side with Curtis Robinson, who went to Stanford, and then on the other side with Ben Barch, who's a buddy of mine, a guy that I love talking to as well. So Barch, we were kind of screwing with Barch there a little bit. Great stuff from Tongas, though. Very, very cool. By the way, thanks. That's going to do it for us. Quick hour. Thanks to Roth. Thanks to Jake. Thanks to John Krosinsky. Thanks to all you guys for listening. I like the Niners to get the win. Sam Darnold is 22-35 career as a starter. I think the Niners knock them off tomorrow. The Niners have covered the spread in 5 straight road games dating back to last season. In true road games, by the way, Shanahan 8-2 against the spread with the Niners coming off short rest. And he's covered the spread by over 7 points a game. So I like the Niners to win. I like the Niners to cover. I do think it'll be low scoring. Check me out tomorrow with John and Adam. And coming up next, it's going to be Adam and Marcus. Fantasize this. Have a great day, everybody.
This is Greg Papa, your voice of 49.